During David's rule, the city of Jerusalem was occupied only on the eastern hill. During Solomon's rule, the city grew larger, and the temple was built on the Temple Mount. But during Hezekiah's rule, the city of Jerusalem underwent major changes. And when Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib was come, and was determined to wage war against Jerusalem, he strengthened himself and built up all the wall that was broken, and raised it up to the towers, and another wall without.
In 721 BCE, the mighty Assyrian kingdom defeated the kingdom of Israel. Thousands of refugees fled to Jerusalem and settled on the western hill. Hezekiah, the king of Judah, also rebelled against the Assyrians, and in order to protect the western hill and its new inhabitants, he built a massive wall 7 meters wide.
The wall on which I am walking right now is the wide wall built by Hezekiah. It was later to be discovered by Professor Nahman Avigad from the Hebrew University.
This would settle a long debate regarding the size of Jerusalem, which was apparently much larger than the narrow dimensions of the city of David. Hezekiah, the king of Judah, must have heard the thunder of the approaching war horses of the Assyrian army as they came to conquer Jerusalem.
He was anxious to build the wall in the fastest way possible. Alas, the refugees from the kingdom of Israel had built their houses in the very places most suitable for the wall, and he had no choice but to destroy their homes. This is one of the houses destroyed by Hezekiah, the king of Judah, while building the wide wall. Isaiah the prophet regarded this deed in a negative light. He says, "And you have numbered the houses of Jerusalem, and you have broken them down to fortify the wall."
Titus's conquest of Jerusalem in the year 70 CE was considered a tremendous achievement by the Romans. His suppression of the long rebellion in Judea proved once again that the Roman Empire was the strongest power in the world. On the Temple Mount, the Roman army cheers its venerated commander Titus. While Jerusalem goes up in flames, Titus quickly prepares the exhibits for the victory parade in Rome. For this purpose, he gathers many valuable objects and prisoners of war. But the celebrations begin even before they arrive. Here in Caesarea, in Beirut, in Agrippa's kingdom in the north, they are drunken parties. To entertain the crowds, thousands of Jews are thrown to beasts of prey and into combat against bloodthirsty gladiators. When Titus finally anchors in Rome, the Romans flock to greet him. The most magnificent victory parade in the empire's history gets underway. The parade begins with a colossal display of strength by the Roman legions. The Roman gods lead the way, followed by a vast stream of spoils of war, silver and gold vessels, ivory, works of art, and animals. Titus brought so much silver and gold in spoils from Jerusalem that their price dropped throughout the empire. Vespasian would use some of the captured treasure to build the Colosseum, the most magnificent Roman amphitheater in the world. The crowd is amazed at the vast amount of plunder, but the climax arrives when the holy temple vessels are paraded before the masses, including the golden menorah. Behind behind them, like a prisoner of war, is carried the representative of the Jewish faith, a single Torah scroll from Jerusalem. In the rear are led the prisoners of war themselves. Defeated and disgraced, the POWs from Israel march through the streets of Rome. Their war wounds are well concealed by the embroidered silk garments they're dressed in by the Romans. But nothing can take away the searing pain they bear in their hearts. The crowds cheer Vespasian and Titus as the victory parade makes its way here to the Capitoline Hill. Here, at the temple of Jupiter Capitolinus, the parade stops and a hush falls on the crowd. Simon Bar Giora, Jewish commander and spirited leader of the rebellion, is pulled from among the ranks of rebels. With a rope around his neck, he is dragged brutally through the streets of Rome as the wild throng beats him from all sides. The Romans immortalized the conquest of Jerusalem and this parade with a glorious monument situated in the heart of the empire's capital. Exactly where the victory parade passed, Domitian, Titus's brother, built a 15-meter-high gate in honor of the great victory. Depicted in the relief on the arch are Roman soldiers crowned with laurel wreaths as they carry the temple vessels, the silver trumpets, the showbread table, and in the center, the temple menorah, painted gold. No wonder the Jews of Rome despised the Arch of Titus. The monument, built 2,000 years ago, served as a painful reminder of the total destruction of Jerusalem and the humiliation of the Jewish people. The sight of the arch seared the Jews' hearts like fire, and for centuries they refused to pass beneath it. Until 1947.
Of the Dutch Committee for Palestine was adopted by 33 votes, 13 against, 10 abstentions.
The day after November 29th, the day the UN Assembly declared the establishment of a Jewish state in the land of Israel, the Rabbi of Rome, Rabbi David Prato, convened the Jewish community before the detested arch. The rabbi wished to mark the historic occasion before his community, who gathered by the arch, along with representatives of the youth movements and refugees from the Holocaust, on their way to Israel. Moved to tears, the elderly rabbi, who had given thousands of speeches, couldn't utter a word. The rabbi cried out, "Who sustained us and kept us and brought us to this day." Then, instead of speaking, he started to march, followed by the whole community, straight into the Victory Arch. For the first time in 2,000 years, Jews passed through the Arch of Titus again. We walked through in the opposite direction, not like our ancestors 2,000 years ago, who passed through as slaves, but as a free people, as if we were walking back to freedom. We felt on top of the world.
The palaces of kings are fascinating places. Their splendor and power evoke respect and wonder. Yet, palaces of the ancient kings were first and foremost symbolic buildings, representing the sovereignty, strength, and power of the kingdom. This is perhaps the reason why 3,000 years ago, King David built himself a magnificent palace here in his new capital, Jerusalem. A large and impressive building would symbolize the power of his kingdom and unite all the tribes together under one flag. The Kingdom of the House of David. But in order to build a grand and luxurious palace, the highest quality materials were needed as well as skilled artisans. The Bible tells us that David's ally Hiram, king of Tyre, provided him with everything he needed, including materials and skilled workers. And Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, and cedar trees, and carpenters, and masons. And they built David a house. The cedar house that was constructed by David was likely the most impressive building in Jerusalem. It's a pity that it was destroyed by the Babylonians and nothing remains of this beautiful structure. Or perhaps something does remain. The story begins back in 2005 when archaeologist Dr. Eilat Mazar excavates at the summit of the city of David and uncovers the foundation of a building from the 10th century, the era of David. Gradually, the foundations of an immense building were uncovered in this very spot. This wall, for instance, measured around 30 meters long, and very close by, she uncovered a stone capital which was undoubtedly part of a magnificent palace. In-depth analysis of the findings and various clues in the Bible as to the location of the palace led Mazar to one clear conclusion. "I have found King David's palace in Jerusalem," Mazar rejoiced, and the world was amazed. It's true, there is no consensus yet among scholars as to whether this is indeed the palace built by King David, and we all have to wait patiently for the end result. But in the meantime, let us journey back in time. What wouldn't we give to be a fly on the wall of the palace when David brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem? The esteemed king, wearing a simple cloth vest and without a crown, dances and rejoices excitedly with the people before the Ark. What an exciting moment! But when the festivities end, the situation becomes awkward. The Ark sits in a simple temporary tent in front of David's magnificent palace, an arrangement that may have suited other kings but is very jarring for David. David turns to the prophet Nathan and pleads with him. "See now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the Ark of God dwelleth within curtains." It was a defining moment, a moment when a new idea was born, to build a permanent building, a temple. However, not all the memories of the palace were so noble. There were many attempts to overthrow the kingdom, the most serious being the revolt instigated by David's beloved son Absalom. When the revolt broke out, David was forced to abandon his palace, flee across the Kidron Valley, and ascend the Mount of Olives to escape into the desert barefoot and weeping. Another event happened here. One day Nathan the prophet arrived upset to the palace gates. He burst right into King David's chambers and scolded him fiercely. "Wherefore hast thou despised the word of the Lord to do that which is evil in my sight? Uriah the Hittite thou hast smitten with the sword, and his wife thou hast taken to be thy wife, and him thou hast slain with the sword of the children of Ammon." Nathan criticized David for his affair with Bathsheba. This same prophet Nathan, consider, had he walked into the chambers of another king during that period, here in the Middle East, he would have met his death. Nathan not only left standing on his own 2 feet and breathing, but he left the king immersed in contemplation, having accepted Nathan's criticism with humility. It seems that in this palace, even the king himself was not exempt from the fundamental principles of morality and justice. But let's put aside the political revolutions and dramas for a moment. Imagine this beautiful palace late at night. After an exhausting day of running the kingdom, King David sits down to write his poems. The walls of the palace fill with the gentle sounds of a harp, and a word so widely identified with David, Hallelujah. David finally succeeds in thwarting all the attempted uprisings against him and continues to rule his palace with an iron fist. David ben Ishai died and was buried here in the city of David, just a few meters from his palace. Yet, the dynasty of the House of David produced 22 kings that ruled for over 400 years. It seems that David's palace was indeed unique. On the one hand, a symbol of sovereignty, strength, and power, and on the other hand, a place of deep faith, values, and spiritual creativity. And of course music, lots and lots of music.
And when Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib was coming, and that he was determined to fight against Jerusalem, he took counsel with his princes and his mighty men to stop the waters of the springs which were outside the city, and they did help him. So there gathered a large group of people together, and they stopped up all the springs in the brook that ran through the midst of the land, saying, "Why should the kings of Assyria come and find much water?"
We are now at the Gihon Spring. It contains an enormous amount of water.
Prior to Hezekiah's rule, all this water flowed outside the city through irrigation channels to the fields of the people and to the king's gardens.
When he prepared Jerusalem for the Assyrian siege, Hezekiah worried that the mighty army of Assyria would camp outside the city walls, gaining access to the city's water source.
He decided to prevent their use of the water by blocking and sealing the springs outside the city, including the Gihon Spring. He diverted the spring's water into an underground tunnel, which had been quarried into the heart of the mountain. Two groups of masons worked towards each other from both sides and met in the middle of the tunnel. And the water flowed from the source to the pool. The tunnel ends at the pool of Siloam, which was inside the city, behind protective walls. The account of this engineering wonder is mentioned explicitly in the Bible and is also documented in the Shiloah inscription, which was discovered 6 meters from the end of the tunnel.
This is a copy of the inscription written in ancient Hebrew letters. It describes the dramatic moment when the two groups met inside the tunnel.
The masons were swinging their axes one towards the other, and they heard the voice of one man calling his fellow. And on the day of the tunneling, the masons bore through, one man towards his fellow, axe upon axe, and the water flowed from the source to the pool for 1,200 cubits.